right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this next talk in the admin track. This is all about how we as Atlassian made the big migration from server to the clouds. And today to tell you about that is going to be one of our Atlassians who managed that project, helped pull everything across, and also has biked up two 14,000-foot mountains in Colorado. So he's an all-round superhero. Please welcome Stephen.
I just want to give a very special thank you to everyone that's in the audience today. It's such a privilege to be here at Summit, talking to you, our customers. And it's something that I've been looking forward to for quite some time now. So, as Kevin said, my name is Stephen Bao, and I work here at Atlassian as an R&D program manager on our cloud platform and cloud products. And I'm excited to talk to you today about Atlassian's very own migration story, in my talk titled, Getting Serious About Cloud Migration. So flashback to just about a year ago today, and I was offered the opportunity to head up migrating our main Jira and Confluence data center instances to Atlassian Cloud. So just for some context, we use a bunch of different instances here at Atlassian, as you might have seen in the keynote, but this one has been part of the lifeblood of the company for quite some time now. It contains content that was created over 15 years ago when we first started the development of our products. It is an instance so steeped in Atlassian history, and it contains all of our victories and struggles throughout the years. And it contains all of our intro user blogs for all the employees who have joined and left the company. So, long story short, I accepted the opportunity, and I embarked on quite the journey. So, before we get into the meat of everything, I wanted to start off with just a bit of market forecasting. So Gartner predicts that by 2021, more than half of global enterprises already using cloud today will adopt an all-in cloud strategy. So here at Atlassian, we've been making many new improvements and adding new features to our suite of Atlassian cloud products. So we ourselves wanted to experience cloud so that we can get more insights into making our cloud experience the best it can be for you, our customers. So even though not all forecasts are right, the industry is trending towards cloud, and we want to be able to get there together with you. So before we dive in any further, I just want to ask you all a quick question. Would you please raise your hand if you're on a self-hosted instance of Confluence or Jira? Wow, all right, that's more than half the room. All right, so would you raise your hand if you've considered migrating to Atlassian Cloud? All right, that's more than we expected. All right, so for those of you that kept your hands up, our admins were in the position that you were about a year ago. And so today, I'll be covering our story in few distinct sections. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about the motivations and what we had to have in place before we actually executed. Second, I'll walk through Atlassian's very own migration journey from beginning to end, migrating our data center instances to Atlassian Cloud. Third, I'll walk through some of our vision for our new tooling that seeks to alleviate some of the migration pains that our customers have been experiencing. And then we should have some minutes for Q&A at the end. So I would ask you to hold your questions until then, and if I'm not able to get to them in the live session, you can always come find me afterwards. And one last thing, we won't be covering Bamboo, HipChat, or other AWS server deployment options in this talk. This will be from migrating from server and data center, Confluence and Jira, to Atlassian Cloud. Great, so let's get started and jump right in. And we'll start with Atlassian's motivations and must-haves for cloud migration. So, we've been slow at moving to cloud, but we've been thinking about it for quite some time now. So when company priorities shifted and the stars aligned, we took the plunge and migrated in order to experience the benefits of cloud. So first off, our teams have been building all of these new cloud features, and a lot of our own employees didn't really know about them or how to use them. So we decided that that needed to change, and that all of our employees should experience all of our new cloud offerings so that every one of us is in tune and we can be a better ambassador for our products and our brand. Secondly, we had pretty minimal adoption of our cloud mobile apps within the company. And so we've got passionate mobile teams pushing out frequent updates, and we wanted to provide them the benefit of company dog fooding. We also wanted Atlassian to think more mobile first as we expand Atlassian Cloud to additional platforms in the future. Third, we had such a large bespoke on-premise setup, and our IT operations team was doing weekly upgrades. So we wanted to stay on the latest versions, but there was a lot of overhead and a lot of hours that was going into doing so. So we wanted to take advantage of the cloud continuous integration pipeline in order to release more frequently with less overhead. And lastly, we wanted to learn from our own experience in order to apply insights to improve the overall migration process for you. So, now that we've got some of our motivations out of the way, let's talk about what we needed. Atlassian Cloud has gotten to the point where it can support an enterprise instance of our size. Our teams are continuing to improve the tooling and the features needed to support IT admins. So first, it was extremely important for us to have a way to keep our users and groups in sync with our internal business systems and processes. We needed this so that we could keep permissions consistent across products and to make sure that onboarding stayed seamless for our IT admins. So when we first started, we started off with Google Sync. And as some of you may know, this doesn't support the ability to sync groups. So we worked closely with our identity teams, and we became early adopters of the public SCIM APIs, which will allow you to sync groups. And this will be available soon with Atlassian Access, soon after Summit. Secondly, we needed Atlassian Cloud to be performant and scalable for an instance of our size. So this means we needed user limits beyond the current 2,000 at the time, and performance that would match or exceed what we had on Data Center. Furthermore, we also needed assurance that performance would continue to scale as we added additional Atlassians. So we worked alongside our Confluence and Jira Cloud teams to prioritize initiatives in order to improve the performance on cloud and to continue to prioritize additional optimizations after we had migrated. And so as you heard in the keynote, we're also excited to announce the arrival of formal 5,000 user tiers so that other large customers can scale with ease and speed. And finally, we needed Atlassian Cloud to be compliant and secure enough for our needs. We've always taken pride in our security and compliance here at Atlassian, but we're growing as an enterprise and needed more. So we needed things like SOC 2 Type 2 certification, which would give us the controls for security, processing integrity, and privacy of our systems. We needed multi-factor authentication in order to strengthen our security with an additional layer of auth. We needed to be compliant with the new privacy regulations that are coming out, such as GDPR for the European market. And so you can learn more about some of the initiatives that our teams are working on at atlassian.com/trust. But we certainly didn't meet all of these requirements when we first started. But by the end, we had all of these boxes ticked. So to sum up this section, Atlassian Cloud is a big part of Atlassian's future, and we were eager to make it our new home for our internal work processes. So this begged the question, how do we expect you, our customers, to migrate to cloud if we haven't even done so ourselves? And so that was exactly the question on our mind as we went through a lot of our own migration journey, which we'll go into next. So now that you have a good idea of what our motivations were, I'm going to take you through a walkthrough of our journey and what we faced getting to cloud. And before we begin, I just want to state that we did it the really hard way, and we don't expect customers to go through what we did. So the job to be done, we had to support over 3,500 active users. For Jira, we had just over 1 million issues to migrate, and of these, it contained over 4,500 components and over 1,600 custom fields. For Confluence, we had over 6,000 spaces to migrate, and this was a mix of both personal and site spaces. And of those 6,000 spaces, they contained over 8 million versions of pages. So that's an average of over 1,300 page versions per space. And we know that we're not the biggest instance, and there are bigger instances out there, but our instance provided to be a challenge for the existing migration infrastructure because our instance is on the bigger side and it's so complex and old. So we've identified 3 main parts to our migration. First is planning, so getting everything in place leading up to the actual big day. Second, the actual production migration, so actually executing and making our cloud instance live to all employees. And finally, the wrap-up, so supporting issues that our users found and winding down operations. So we'll start with planning, and this phase was by far the largest part of the journey, and it spans several quarters of our time. So let's start with step 1. A decision is made. So we've had plans to migrate to cloud for quite some time, but we've always had little traction. So around this time last year, it was announced to make the migration of this instance to cloud one of 12 official company mandates, backed by our founders, Mike and Scott. So we knew we were going to do it, but we just needed to figure out how we were going to execute. And going into this, we had already anticipated that it would prove to be a challenge, based on some of the stories from our support teams. If it were easy, we would have just gone ahead and done it already. So that brings us to step 2. Investigation begins. So we touched on some of our needs earlier, but we still had a bunch of questions to answer. And so we really tried to come at this from a customer perspective, and we dug into analyzing what admins needed, what end users needed, and how we actually executed well. We did lots of analysis on areas that were going to be pain points, mainly the areas of user management, applications, reliable export and import, and performance. So as mentioned earlier, user management was of top priority, and what we had currently didn't cut it. So we explored a bunch of different options, and we were able to accelerate getting the public SCIM APIs on our identity team's roadmaps. Concurrently, we did an audit of our current apps, what users were currently using, and what was getting the most usage. And we interviewed some of these users to find out their needs and concerns, and to see if there were any alternatives that we could pursue. We also analyzed existing migration paths at the time, and we were quite surprised to find out about the limitations for big instances such as ours. And lastly, we looked at load testing and performance at the scale at which we were planning to migrate. And in the beginning, there were some real worries and concerns. We knew we'd be pushing our limits. So that brings us to step 3, making decisions, making compromises, and settling on an approach. So after our initial investigation wrapped up, we realized that we had to make a couple of compromises based on what we had to work with and in-flight development roadmaps. And we wanted to focus not only on the destination, but the journey it took in getting there so that we could apply those learnings to improve the migration process. So for Confluence, we settled on an incremental space-by-space migration, opting to pick and choose which spaces we wanted to migrate. We took this one step further for larger spaces, and we purged older data from within the space itself, as to not bring over unneeded data, but to really optimize what we could fit in a single downtime. For Jira, we went with the only currently supported way of site migration. We also had to clean up old projects and custom fields in order to improve performance. So we know that applications are a big consideration for a lot of you. And a lot of ours didn't have cloud equivalents, so we had to make compromises on those. In the end, we decided that the benefits of moving to cloud outweighed the pain of not having some of those apps. but this is not to say we're not investing in our cloud ecosystem, as we're continuing to do so, and we have more and more cloud apps every day. So we actually have some custom applications that we have built over the years, and they get a lot of usage from employees. So with these, we had to get pretty creative. And so teams signed up to work on these in their ship it and 20% times in order to port these to cloud. And lastly, we prioritized reliable export and import, focusing on issues that would affect a wide range of customers and not so on issues that would only affect us. So that brings us to step 4, our testing and fixing. So even though this is only one slide, it by far took the bulk of the time. When we first started Confluence Space imports, we were only achieving about a 50% success rate. 50%. It turns out that there was a pretty nasty bug that was pulling in additional spaces and exports and causing imports to fail. So while this was being fixed, we started building tooling in order to automate this process, as we certainly weren't going to migrate over 6,000 spaces one by one. So at a high level, the tooling that we built is a microservice, which is deployed via AWS, and it takes a list of space keys, exports them, downloads them, uploads them, and then imports them. And so we experimented with using multiple clone server instances in order to get more exports out of it so we can get as many as we could. We measured and calculated the effects of adjusting concurrency to each migration step in order to better optimize this fit. So while we're not releasing the tooling that we had built, we're using it to design our polished end migration solution, which you'll see a preview of in a bit. And while all of this Confluence work was going on, at the same time, our Jira site import continued to fail. We would diagnose, fix, and try again, and every time we would get just a little bit closer, but it was failing for months. So as you can imagine, it was a huge day when we hit that milestone of an actual finished Jira site import. But at that point, we still had a long way to go, and we needed consistency and reliability from when we actually executed on the production day. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the phrase, patience is a virtue. So our patience was tested to the limits, and we went through countless rounds of this process, consulting with our support teams on how they tackled similar issues with our own customers. And even though migration tickets don't make up a majority of support cases, the time spent on them on average is much longer. So this all too common loop is representative of a typical customer experience and the pain and the frustration we felt firsthand for ourselves. So over time, as we built up knowledge of the steps to be executed for a migration of our size, we amassed a runbook to capture and record all the steps needed to pull off a migration of this size successfully. And this continued to grow with best practices as we learned, and it became a trusted source for many teams and core to our process. And we didn't limit this to just technical execution. We included our steps to communicate to the rest of the company in order to better set expectations. And so once we were confident that the most systemic export and import issues had been fixed, we began full-scale dry runs in the weeks leading up to our goal with the tooling that we had built. And we ran into some pretty unique issues. There were some space imports that failed because of a particular emoticon in a page title that had a Unicode encoding error. We fixed these and we continued to push on our migration journey. Dry runs were of utmost importance, and we ran quite a few of these to cover all of our bases and to get a realistic idea of the time that it would take to migrate everything. And the last step of planning is 7, communications. So leading up to the big day, communications became a vital piece contributing to the success of the project. We worked closely with our IT admins, and they were in the loop for most of the decisions we made, but we needed to communicate these changes to the rest of the company. So to do this, we communicated in as many ways as we could. So various emails using the all-staff listserv, We spoke at a global town hall about the status of the project and the schedule, and we set up various Confluence FAQ pages in order to better set expectations about differences between server and cloud and what they would be missing potentially. And lastly, we used in-product banners as a more in-your-face approach to inform our users as we got closer to the migration date. So all this planning led up to the big day, the actual production migration. So things didn't all go smoothly. We ended up having to push back our scheduled date a handful of times because of new bugs we discovered and deemed urgent to fix. So what actually happened? We scheduled our migrations on weekends in order to minimize the business impact. And we made the decision to split up Jira and Confluence into different weekends in order to reduce the risk. We had our handy Runbook ready to go. And we started off by making our instances read-only to prevent edits that wouldn't migrate over, but in order to make that data available for our employees if they needed it over the weekend. We had a core team of engineers supporting throughout the whole weekend and supporting teams on call as needed. And this core team monitored throughout the day and night for these weekends, optimizing our resources to get as many spaces or as many projects imported as quickly as possible. So this is not to say it was without hiccups. We had a few larger spaces for Confluence that ran into some network issues, and we had to defer these to a later time. But in the end, the migration was an overall success, thanks to all of the hard work that our teams had put in. So after all the fun and games of the migration weekend, and a good night's rest for the team, we proceeded to the finishing stages of the project in order to wrap up. So making sure that our users were being heard was of high priority to us. So we set up a Jira project and Stride room in advance so that users could submit issues and feedback that they ran into. And in the first 2 weeks, we had a healthy flow of tickets. And the majority of these actually ended up being questions and feedback about differences between server and cloud. It was important to us to respond to these inquiries promptly. And we also cross-referenced these tickets with existing migration bugs so that we could better prioritize the overall production bug triage. We also implemented a redirect from our old instance to our new one in order to better help our users find what they're looking for. So, to sum it up, we saw quite a few immediate wins shortly after launching. Key ones being that we saw internal mobile adoption shoot way up. And there were so many employees that reached out to us saying how the mobile apps have been a game changer for their day-to-day. We've been able to catch some issues fast and before they reach customers to prevent further incidents. Our cloud product and platform teams are getting much more feedback faster. We've started running user experiments on our own instance. And lastly, performance is continuing to hold up. And we're using these load patterns on our instance to better optimize for large cloud instances. So, looking back on it all, this diagram sums up the overall process loop that went into this journey. It was a whole bunch of troubleshooting, building, fixing, realizations, and both successes and failures. We had equal amounts of breakthroughs as we did times of frustration. So, what did we get from all of this? Because there were so many different requirements to tick off before we executed, the scope of our work continued to grow as we planned, tested, and fixed. So for example, the size of our total attachments nearly doubled during the course of the project, and we had to account for this and project how much longer it would take when we actually scheduled the migration. So everything from network speed to database performance were of utmost importance when going through our planning, and we tried to squeeze every last bit out of it. So, to say the least, our migration was far from easy. There are so many takeaways that we couldn't capture here, but we're using them internally. So first off is that planning was paramount for our migration. Research, getting the right teams involved, and making decisions. There was always another consideration that we had to take into account, and careful planning helped mitigate the effects of these. Secondly, there were so many unknowns with migrating an instance of our size. We felt like trailblazers cutting through the migration jungle and dropping trail markers as we went. It was an exciting experience, but also frequently daunting and tiring. So third, with so many moving pieces, things went wrong and we were kept on our toes. It was vital to have a contingency plan and support. And lastly, we made lots of fixes along the way, but we're far from done. We've amassed a huge list of improvements that we're working to incorporate into the new migration experience. So, to sum it up, it was a long and painful experience, filled with lots of ups and downs, and we don't want you to have to go through the same thing. A lot of work from a lot of teams went into pulling this migration off, and it's our goal that you shouldn't need to invest the same amount of effort in your own migrations. So, that was a lot to digest. You probably have a lot of questions on your mind about what's to come. So next, we're excited to talk to you about our vision for the new migration experience. So as you just saw, the current migration bridge has several holes that we needed to fix along the way. Some of these were small, and some of these were quite large, and needed time to fix. So we're working to fix these holes, not just to patch them up, but to really improve the migration bridge so that the experience is as delightful and pleasant as it can be. So we've set a long-term goal for ourselves, and that goal is to enable any self-hosted customer to migrate to Atlassian Cloud. So no matter how many users or complex your self-hosted instances, we're seeking to be able to eventually give you the ability to migrate to cloud if you choose to do so. So, to do that, let's talk about the future and what that might look like. So the following preview has been rated A for Atlassian administrators, so please bear with us. The specifics may vary in what we end up shipping out. So, what do we want to do? Over the next 2 years, we want to build a new and improved migration architecture that will make migration more intuitive. So using a combination of in-product, out-of-product, and partner-assisted methods that will make migration feel easier than upgrading, and with a whole lot less nail-biting. 2, we want to make migration more flexible. Building out more modes that will be able to allow customers to migrate data at the granularity that you see fit. So migrate everything at once or incrementally over time. The choice will be up to you. We want to make migration more reliable. We want to build up more trust so that you know exactly what to expect going into migration, make it more likely to migrate without problems, make it more easier to monitor the status when it's in progress, and easier to verify that it actually worked correctly. So you'll know exactly what it's doing every step of the way. No more guessing. And lastly, we want to make migration more scalable. It won't be subject to the same size limitations that we have today. So from small teams to massive enterprises, you'll be able to migrate with confidence. So next, I'll be presenting to you a preview of what we're envisioning our new migration flow might look like. So imagine that you're dropping into an in-product experience where you're presented with this. So first off, we want to find out a little bit more about your migration goals so that we can tailor fit a plan to your needs. So in this example, we'll ask you what products you want to migrate first. Do you want to migrate just Jira or just Confluence or all of them? And within those products, do you want to migrate everything or incrementally? So just migrate a subset of teams or content. You'll have the flexibility to choose as you please. So next, based on those answers that you provided us, we want to provide you some personalized recommendations for your use case. So in this example, you'll create your Runbook, and it definitely won't be as long as ours. Then you'll install the new migration apps that you'll need to set the migration experience up. After that, you'll set up and configure your cloud account if you haven't done so already. And then lastly, run and execute your plan. Next, we want to make it easy for you to monitor the progress of your migration, giving you a real-time status of what's completed and what's left, along with estimates so that you'll be prepped to go when it's all said and done. In today's world, you need to do this manually, and it's often confusing how much time is left on your import. So instead of worrying that if you've got everything in place and the right people on deck to support, we want you to sit back and relax while we take care of migrating your data to cloud and do the heavy lifting. And then lastly, once the migration of your data is complete, we'll walk you through the last wrap-up steps that you'll need to complete your migration. So in this example, it includes tasks such as setting up a chat room to answer any questions that your users might have, updating your app links to point from your old instance to your new cloud instance, and enabling redirects from your old instance to the new corresponding cloud URL so that your saved bookmarks or emails will go to the corresponding tickets or pages or comments. And then welcoming your team to Atlassian Cloud and providing them with the onboarding that they'll need to hit the ground running. And last but not least, enjoy the benefits of Atlassian Cloud. It's only been a couple of months since we migrated, but we're already reaping the benefits, and we're confident that you will too. Welcome to your last upgrade. So, even though all this stuff looks great, Rome wasn't built in a day. And you should be excited about this, but there's a few key points that you should be aware of. We've learned a lot from our own migration and additional customer research, but we're still in the process of getting additional insights and conducting usability testing. We want to apply all of these insights that we collect in order to create the most polished migration experience that we can for you. And so we're currently in the process of building out a new migration platform as we speak. And we're going to be continuously iterating this over FY19, improving it every step of the way. And so lastly, even though we're neck deep in development, we still want to talk to you about your own migration journey. We know that customers have diverse needs and concerns, and we want to find out as much as we can in order to tailor the journey to you. So, to wrap it all up, there's two big takeaways that I hope you'll get from this talk. First is that cloud is a big part of Atlassian's future, and we're continuing to invest in our Atlassian Cloud suite of products in order to make it great. Secondly, we did it the hard way so that you won't have to, and we're using these learnings to improve the migration bridge so that you can migrate to Atlassian Cloud smoothly and seamlessly. So, while we work on that vision I just shared, we still want to make sure you're covered if you need to migrate to cloud. And so, just earlier today, we published our new Cloud Migration Center on Atlassian.com/cloud-migration, and we encourage you to check it out. It brings together the information needed to help you decide if a move to cloud is right for you, and to navigate the current complexities of migrating from server to cloud. We'll be continually adding more tools and guides over the coming months, so please don't hesitate to contact us and let us know if we didn't cover your question or if something isn't clear. So it looks like we have a few minutes for Q&A, but before we start, I just want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed our story, and we're looking forward to sharing our experience with you over the next coming months.
Yes, hello. We're talking about Jira and Confluence, but was Bitbucket also migrated to cloud?
No, we just covered Jira and Confluence in our migration.
Can you talk a little bit about the selection process for where you homed Jira and Confluence in the cloud, and what feedback you received from your community on performance post upgrade or migration?
Sorry, could you repeat your first question?
How did you select which location to home your Jira Confluence instances in the cloud?
Could you clarify what you mean by location?
So I think I saw in the keynote that Sydney was a new location for cloud, but I think you have a couple of other instances. I'm imagining if we were to look at this, there would be a lot of discussion about where we would home our instance. I was just wondering what your experiences were.
So yeah, when we started, we had a couple of different areas that we could choose from, but for ours, we held it in US West 2, because that was where the other systems and APIs were, so that we could speed up the process. And your second question was along the lines of feedback that we received and the performance. So we actually got initial feedback at first that Confluence felt snappier than it did before. And so as mentioned, performance is continuing to hold up, and everyone is overall pretty satisfied with it.
Hi, so if Rome wasn't built in a day, are you able to actually share any qualitative metrics based on your experience in the migration process? So number of people involved, number of person hours, cost of the business, that kind of thing.
So for number of personnel involved, we actually didn't have too many people that were 100% dedicated to the project. So it was a group of about a handful of us, and we had to coordinate with the different product teams and platform teams in order to tie everything together to actually bring everything to fruition.
Hi, what's your roadmap in terms of increasing the number of users on cloud? Because right now it is 5,000, and what's your upcoming roadmap for going beyond 5,000?
Yeah, so as most of you are aware, we just announced the 5,000 user tiers, but as far as anything after that, I unfortunately don't have the details on that. But come find me afterwards so I can direct you to the right person.
A question: with as much data as you have, how did you get around your imposed limit on total instance size? It's like, that's a big thing that's limiting us from migrating to the cloud. So did you guys just, they give you a pass and you could use all the data you needed?
Yeah, so with our migration, there were some custom configurations that we could do that we're working on, of course, improving the migration and the tiers to 5,000 users, so that's a step. So performance and other considerations we're continuing to work on, but there was some custom configuration that was involved in our migration.
Is the cloud service available in Europe?
Sorry, what was
The
that?
hosting? Yeah.
So it was in US West 2, as I just mentioned before.
Okay.
So, yeah, Frankfurt will be opening next year. We've got one in. So sorry, we have a data center in Ireland today. There will be one in Frankfurt coming soon, I believe, is the answer to that. All right, thank you guys. That's all the questions we have time for. If you still have some questions for Stephen, we will be around after the talk for you to ask one-on-one. Please feel free to come and find Stephen, ask him any questions, or later on the show floor. Thank you very much for coming today.